Well, not exactly the video I was planning on doing today, but one that'll look back on and kind of have a laugh later on in life. So yesterday I ran Pritchett on the way back, on the 2-hour drive back. Towards the very end, I started getting this weird knocking from the driver front, and I thought maybe I lost my hub, or maybe my speed bump that's getting all kind of messed up was causing problems, but I didn't know what it was. I drove around, it stopped knocking, then I started driving on the highway back and it started grinding, and then I stopped and then looked. I'm like, I can't see what it was. There's a pebble in the brake pad or whatever. And I drove it and it was fine. And then started driving out because we're going to do Golden Spike going in Rusty Nail. And it started to squeak, started chirping, and then it made this weird grab and got up to the parking lot at Gemini Bridges. And this housing was so hot that it burned my fingers to the touch, and it was bubbling out what grease I had left after going 65 miles an hour on that. This, my friends, wheel bearing. Now what it took out with all that and all that heat, we'll see. I'm just going to load it up on the trailer and get it home, but I'll have you guys follow along to see. So let me know that it is mandatory when you go through water to clear out your wheel bearings. I haven't done that yet. I changed the diff fluid. I thought it was fine. I didn't think anything else of it because I didn't know any better. Well, now I know. So my experience when it comes to my Super 60 front end from Fusion is that these main bracket bolts are put on with like JB Weld. I'm just joking, but it is so tight on there that, like, I tried running an impact on it, like a strong one, and it wouldn't budge it. So I ended up grabbing, so the open end doesn't fit, but the 14 point on there on this 13/16 from the Husky is tight enough that I could put it on there, and I smashed this thing with a 2-pound sledgehammer to get it to move like a bunch of times, and it finally cracked. And then the bottom one that's underneath, I tried doing it, and I ended up having to pull out a 3-pound and just swing it away with it attached. So as you can see, I beat the snot out of that end, but it broke them loose. I doubt I'll ever have this level of like tension on them again. I don't even know what the torque specs are. I'm certain I'll find it out. It does look like they put blue Loctite on here. That sure felt like some kind of red times 500. So I'll get this hung up. This is an important part to take this off, get this brake off the rotor, and then we'll go from there. That's interesting. The wheel speed sensor looks like it's gotten some rubbing on it. But all in all, not too bad. It's definitely something that I think I'll throw some anti-seize in here next time, because when this gets wet and rustied up, I don't want to crack this thing if I ever have to take it off again. I took the bolt off, and there's definitely some Loctite on here, and I'm pretty sure they used red. Red's typical, because I mean this is on a JKU. That's what they call for on these bolts on the stock axles. I typically still use blue because I mark them so that way I can watch them move. And because off and on I have to take off my calipers and deal with it, I never go ahead and leave the actual bracket on. I take the bracket off to take the caliper off. So FYI. There's some pitting right here on my rotor. I'll have to take a look at that and see what's happening here. Just a little bit, but I can see it, so I'll keep an eye on that. It's time to move into removing these. Now each one of these, they come off. It's a 5/32 Allen, but there's a plastic washer that's in there that also needs to come out with it. So let's go ahead and take a quick pull on these. See the status of I think they want you in lock position. They say it's easier to put it together that way. But ultimately, when you put it back together, there's these, yeah, this thing's already pushing apart. There's these clamps here. This is normally further back, but it's in a lock position, so you can't see that. But these will slide. There's a little notch here, and that lines up with that notch, and that's how you put it on and make sure you're the right way, so that way when you rotate it, it's not funky. This is my first time I took the lid off when I first torched this after Pritchett, but this is my first time actually pulling it apart. And when I look this over, it looks like this is the spot. Man, it almost feels like I need to unlock this pig to get in there, but I watched Holly take hers apart, Mischief Maker TV, to kind of get a grasp of what I'm kind of should be expecting to see here, which is just a ring. So instead of a different type of ring that I would expect, which would be a snap ring, these come out in these coiled. Good thing I'm recording this, so I may never get this right again. And this can come out. Come on, little buddy. Is there another ring I'm supposed to take out? So I love these videos that I watch of somebody else's, because I can check back when I forget. Please don't hold me accountable for whatever you break doing this, but there we go. It's because this is wobbling. That there's a ring here, so there's a depression that goes around here, and you can take a pry bar and go back here and try to pry your drive shaft out as much as possible, or your inner axle shaft. This is so loose that it's, so I gotta kind of push back on that. But then there's this little ring here. You gotta go off much like the other one and go around on it. If I remember right, there's a spring behind this, so let's hold this back. Let's see what we see. Okay, so that's not too bad. So this looks like this is going to end up just, see how loose this is? I think I'm going to find chunks everywhere in there. We'll see. Let's slide this off. It's part of the Yukon hub. Okay. So that looks like that's still in good shape. It doesn't look like, I mean, other than the fact that it's got freaking burnt grease. Let's go grab, what do we have here? Oh, it's nasty in here. That looks like some broken bearing cap. I'll see about all that. Let's see if we can grab this. and bring it out. Look at that nasty grease, dude. It's supposed to be like gray or what have you, but because I was ignorant at the time and are knowledgeable now, and am knowledgeable now, you go through water crossings, pull this stuff apart. And because I go through a lot of water crossings in Utah, and when I go out to California, I really need to pull this apart often. So when I go through Fordyce, I mean, we're burying these axles. When I go through King Creek in Moab, we're drowning these axles. So it definitely, I'm fortunate that I did this now instead of when I was, ow, oh, I almost stabbed myself. Okay, so there wasn't a second ring retaining this in. Actually, it looks like it's in fine shape itself. Ugh. There's definitely chunks of old metal. There's a little bearing. I'm gonna bury in a thick old washer. Let's see what we're cooking with here. I just pulled this apart and took a look at it, and I actually have a really big problem. This is supposed to have a spring in here behind the section, these gated teeth right here, spring that would push it out. But let's go ahead and get these hubs off, these locking nuts that are in here. Got 4 teeth, so go ahead and pull it off. But there's one that comes out. Mine had one, and then it has this keyed pressure plate, and there's a notch in here on this threaded barrel on the inside that that all rests in. Oh yeah, oh yeah. So here's my spring that I got crushed to bits when I got all messed up, so I'll have to take a look at that. So that makes sense where my spring went. Now it appears that there's another one of these that goes between those. All right. Okay, now we got the second one off. So there is a second one. There's just some kind of a washer, a retainer in between, so they're not jammed up against one another. So that's rad. Looks like it just wants to slide off. All right, I just washed Holly's back, and at this point she pulled her front bearing, and then it slid off like no problem. So I think at this point, ooh, slide hammering is the way to go. So the shaft goes through this, and this looks like it's just a pinch sleeve that holds that together. So I think I'm gonna have to reorder one of these parts from Fusion. But if you look here, like, not bad, but there's this groove right here. There's little black chunks in the back, little bearing rollers, little pieces. So I got to get this apart. So the rear seal was a terrible pain to get out. And then here's the bearing. So my rear bearing was in perfectly fine condition and greatly greased. I can't really tell what's going on right now because it's so filthy in there, but all my little roller bearings and stuff. But we'll clean that out, have a look, and go from there. In an effort to try and see a comparison, I've started to take apart this passenger one, which hadn't shown any problems, but obviously you can see the grease and stuff needs done. But so just for the tear apart, pulling off that main hub cover, then the lock ring that wraps around it, and then this piece that's got the angles and the lock ring on there, and then this came off after that, which is on the end of the axle stub. Okay, then came out with the axle stub, the outer piece, then the inner piece right here, and then there's a spacer right here. Outshot the spring, which is actually equal in size on both ends. And then after that, out came out one of the threaded pieces, then that spacer, then the other, and then out came this, which I don't know if I saw this on the other one, but then that was there, and the inside, the cup that's on the inside was facing in. So I'm trying to put these so that way I can just flip them in there. But one thing I'm noticing when I'm playing with this and I'm trying to wiggle off, looks like I have some slop in my kingpin, because I'm able to move this up and down, and it's moving the whole knuckle just a little bit. So I'll need to look at adjusting this or fixing this to get that slop out. I also realized I had some play on my steering that I think this portion here on my tie rod compressed some, so now there's some airspace under here. So I'm gonna have to get back in here and tighten these up too. Well, I was able to get it off. I actually had to tap it. So I rotated it, tapped it back here on the back side of the wheel studs. It was press fit, it felt like. Well, it wasn't really truly press fit, but here's where it wore out on the other one where there's a lip. So you can see where the bearing was riding on it and where the rear one is. Let's see if I can get close enough. So this is the smaller one, is the outer, and the larger is the inner. But this one, I don't know if it'll focus, that says 4 Tango dash Lima Mike 104949 as the part. Looks like an NTN brand. And then it also says USA -D, and then it's 16 Lima Romeo dash 0715 Mike. And then the larger one, also NTN. I don't think this thing's focusing very well. 4 Tango dash 387 Alpha. And that's Japan AL. So those are your two bearings. Maybe I'll put the part numbers in the description. I've never filled in information like that, just so that way you know what it is. That way you can order them up early if you feel like you want to go ahead and do that. Well, back at it finally. I was able to go ahead and knock the bearing race out for the outer one. And I had already ordered new ones. Now these are the, I forget what brand these are. They're like NTN or something like that, and they're expensive, like 45 bucks a set. But I was able to find the exact same setup with a Timken that's, instead of made in wherever that one was, made in the USA. Set 38, which has the right race and bearing on there, which was, see if we can get it. So the number on the left is the race, and the number on the right was the bearing. So set 38 from Timken, which I think was like 20 bucks or something like that, versus like 45 plus like another piece, because they were selling the bearing and the race separate on the other one. So new bearing. I'll go ahead and get this packed up, and I'm doing it on both sides on the outside. The inner ones had so much grease left on it, no big deal, but I figure might as well replace both of the outers and get that done. So that'll go ahead and get popped in here, greased up, and then that completes the outer one. The inner one, the race I'm not knocking out. I'm just going to go ahead and re-grease the bearing, throw it in there. And then when I pop these out, which are the inner, so on the back side, these are the seals. This side, which the lighting's so hard. Okay, so it's flat with, like, this side attaches directly to the rubber. On the other side, there's like a lip of space and air. And that's pertinent because there's Timken ones, part numbers that you can get, which is what I did to get an equivalent. which was here. So what the heck is this part number? There we go. So this is the part number to replace it. Now, I did get some other ones that I ordered from Fusion to replace it, which is basically the same size. The difference was the thickness here. The ones that I got that came in a Yukon gear set, which were like, I think an NTN. No, I don't know what the heck they were. Anyways, I'll try to get the notes for it. Was a little bit thicker this ways. I'm still gonna knock it flat. So there's where you would see, like, there's a gap right here in between the rubber and that. And then this one, the rubber is actually touching the metal that's sealed to it. So that on the back side will be the thing. This side that's connected to the rubber will be the one that's facing the inside of the vehicle. So this lip will be on the inside of the hub on the back side. So just a little piece of info that I was learning to figure out what in the heck people were meaning. And then I'll probably, I mean, it's got this red and the other one has green on it. I'm still going to probably put some RTV, just a thin layer of it when I pop this in. And then I was able to get the race in on this one just using the old, what is this, 81 mil, whatever the crap. Just hitting it down in there, and you got to finesse those in. It catches and usually offsets. So I put it in there flat, and then I tried to hammer it, kept twisting. So I ended up using my brass drift and kind of helping put some more direct pressure to go evenly, which is what I used that brass drift to knock out the actual race before. So FYI, that's just how I did it. So I'm going to go in the back, clean out the bearing, re-grease it, put it in there, set up, put the seal in there, and I'm going to take this inside because it's cold out here. I want to make sure the RTV sets up. And then I'll go ahead, grease that, get that all set up. All right, I got the seals on the back. Now, after doing this, I realized how much of an idiot I am that I put a little bit of red RTV. I usually would do that for like a pinion seal, but these ride on a nice dry spindle. So really, there's no need to go ahead and do that. Just hit them on because all it's doing is holding in grease. So kind of a ridiculous thing I did, but I won't do that again next time. But they're in the house so they can dry because it's cold out. Well, I'm on the driver's side back now. Trying to put the new spindle on because this one's wore, which isn't going to hold it tight. So I had to try to get these nuts off. And it pulled quite a few of the studs out, which was actually a little bit surprising. I was hoping that they weren't, because I saw it spinning. So I'm going to have to re-put those in, put some red Loctite in when I do it. And I looked on some online, and I thought it said like 65 foot-pounds to tighten it up. But I'm going to tell you right now, man, I put my torque wrench on to go ahead and reverse them out, just double-checking torque specs. And it took 170 foot-pounds to finally get it to spin without clicking on my 3-foot torque wrench, or like 2.5 foot torque wrench, something like that. So it was 170 foot-pounds to break these loose. 165 didn't do it. I double-checked and went 165 on tightening, and it was, I mean, dude, I'd hate to think those are 165, but I mean, I guess if it's holding on your spindle and everything like that to your knuckle, that can make sense. But here's obviously the bracket for the wheel speed sensor on there. So that's going to come off. And then, yeah, here we go. Off comes the spindle. And that's where that spindle bearing goes and what have you that came in the kit, which I thought was weird. I didn't know that I needed it. For documenting sake, it came with, when it came from Fusion, I ordered the spindle. As you can see how that's kind of a rounded one there. The one they sent me was just a cut one, straight across instead, which no big deal as long as it's the right stuff. Right, no big deal. But this thing has like a tapered rubber washer on here, a hard plastic right here. And then there's like a rubber that goes over the end of the axle shaft to kind of buffer that. And what came, I mean, maybe this is supposed to go over that somehow. Sorry, I'm not even showing you. Sorry, maybe this is supposed to go over that somehow in a similar manner. I'm not quite sure. This hard plastic piece looks quite a bit like this plastic piece. I guess let's take it out. The tapered side is smaller side out on this thing. Let's have a look-see. See what's about it. Compare these puppies up. So, I mean, not exactly the same size. The new one's in the back. It's a little thicker and it's got a step. And this one just flat out doesn't. Flat on the back and then a little tapered in here. And that's what was going on this. But let's see if the old, it's about the same diameter. It's a little funky. And it's not quite the same. I'll probably message them or call them and be like, what the fuck? Why is this stuff different? This stuff's still good though, so I don't know why I would need to do that. And then the little rubber one that's tapered, it's got a little like indentation here. The only other thing that would look similar would be this, which isn't the same. So I'll check the back of the spindle and see what's what there, because maybe all that crap goes in there, but it doesn't look like it. So I'm going to put this back on with the taper side facing out. Okay. Same size there to ride on that. So that's good. Same size there. Is that a partner? Okay, let's see if we can get the Koyo USA B as in Bravo. Let's see if I can get the light right. 2414. So, I don't think it matters which side's out, to be honest with you. Actually, it's rounded in the bottom there, so I'm going to put the rounded side. There's a more flat side and then a more rounded side, and so my gut's telling me to put the more rounded side down and in. Let's see. Yeah, that's the case over here. There's a more rounded side on the back side there, and it doesn't press all the way down and against it, but it does appear that they've countersunk it enough to probably fit this to slide in there. So I'll go ahead and get my the freaking seal press, race bearing press, and get this sucker put in there. All right, I did double verify when I cleaned this off. You can see the it's also Koyo, and then the same part number here, which was Bravo 2414. So let's dig it out, and then I figured out what this is. It looks like it's just a seal that you can press in instead of using this. So it looks like those three are just, so the hard plastic and then this thing is just a different version of this. But I'm going to stick with that. So I'm going to press this in, get it all the way pressed down, leave enough room for this, because I'll just keep this stuff as spares in the event that I need it at some point. Well, I finally just decided to come back out here and I got this pressed in. So I ended up just using the big flat one and getting it down, because I didn't have one that had a good size that would slip in here on the inside of this. And then it ended up just flipping this inside out so it would fit and hammering it down low in there. So I'll probably go ahead and give this a little greaser. Who knows if that's right or not, but that's what we'll be doing. Throwing a little red tacky here, even if I throw it around the ring up here, so that way it keeps everything nice rolling. I have all 6 of these now in at 165. Loctite the threads that went back into this knuckle on these 3 right here that pulled out the stud with the actual bolt or with the nut, and then these 3 are down to 165. Triple checked all the torque on it, nice and firm. Obviously this red Loctite's got to cure. How well that happens in this cold, I might have to throw a heater in this area just to go ahead and make sure it stays put instead of running around. Just like everything, I usually do everything twice. Luckily, I noticed I didn't put this on before I got the hub fully seated. And this is for the wheel speed sensor. All right, I figured I'd go ahead and after messing around with the driver's side, trying to figure it out, I'll go ahead and put this passenger side together on camera and then kind of tell you where I messed up, because I still have to go back over to the driver's side and double check some stuff. So I have the bearing pushed in there, the new replacement outer bearing, and then it's time to go ahead and put the retaining. And then this one's got the little tab here, tab facing out, and that's the one you're going to want to get on there. Now I looked online, I looked on the Fusion 4x4 Facebook page, and they don't really want to say a whole lot just because of liability. And obviously I can't hold anybody's liability. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing, and you guys get to choose. I think their online things that if you're doing brand new outer and inner bearings, you would torque this down to 100 foot-pounds, back it off, torque down to 50 foot-pounds, and then back it off to get it to rotate well, so to get this to spin freely. And I could already feel how how much tension's already in that, but no more than a quarter turn or something like that. So you can look on the different chats on that. I looked on just a generic Kingpin 60, and they said to torque it down to 50, back it down, torque it down to 50, and then back it off to feel on the spin on it, but not to have any play when you're wiggling this up and down. Like right now there's wobbling in here, and that's because it's not, obviously not all the way tightened down yet. So right now I'm going to go off of what Holly did with hers, which she has the Mr. Maker TV channel, and essentially she put hers down to she says 80 to 85, but because the rear bearing isn't brand new, I'm going to go ahead and set this to 85, and then I'll back it off, then I'll put it to 50, and then it says not to go more than a quarter turn off. So that's what we're going to do right now. So I have my torque wrench set at 85, and they say to do it while you're rotating. So okay, so that obviously just got it to stop. Back it off. Okay, so that's supposedly to seat it. Quick adjustment from 85, and then put this back on. And while rotating this, get this down to a 50. And then you can back it off no more than a quarter turn, which is what they say, depending on the feel. To me, I don't really know this part, to be honest. Like, what is it supposed to feel like? Like, to me, there's not a whole lot of difference in feel at 50 than looser. So I'll ride mine out at 50. I'll back it off just a fraction, just because they said I could. Who knows? If I end up blowing these outer bearings, it's a bummer, but you know, practice makes improvement. So we got that in. Then there's this keyed one right here. And the thing I didn't double check on the driver's side is it's got this little notch here, and there's a notch on the spindle that this needs to slide in, and you'll need to rotate this nut so that it matches up with one of the holes. So I got to line up that key notch properly on there. So that's locked in. And then the outer one. And all these are greased up. There's a couple different things. So Fusion says to go to 100 to 125. The site that I looked at that said just the Dana 60s. The outer one goes to 160. So what I did is I about split the difference and I put these to 140. All right. So 140. Still rotating just fine. After that, we got that little funny washer thingy that kicks out. The outer lip just obviously sliding in this way. Nope, I'm an idiot. I have to take that crap off. That goes on the bearing before I put the nut on. Wow, I'm an idiot. Wow. So, slap this baby in. Holy crap. First, over your bearings. Now that we have both of those in there, everything locked down, what we're going to do is throw on this small spacer that goes on here and slides right in against the actual back end of that nut. And then we need to go ahead and get in the actual hub assembly set. Now there's teeth on the outside which match up with teeth along the inside of this, and there's teeth on the inside of the one which matches up with the stub. So personally, I know people try to throw them on together. I have a little bit more of a problem with that. So I'll take old spring, which goes behind this, put the spring in, grab this set, and I'm going to have this little retainer ring ready for me because that's what goes on the little lip in here to hold this all back before we go to the next part. So have everything greased and ready to go. I'll try it together one time and see how we do. You can rotate this axle shaft. Oh, there we go. There we go, rotating everything behind. And then you can push from your U-joint back to go ahead and get you a little bit more space. And then start to go ahead and hook and rotate this retaining coil, whatever they call them, on here. Pushing the axle. Okay. Already getting some of that. See how it's holding that in? Push that back on the spring. Get this rotated the rest of the way on. Push back on this. Then give this a little bit of a glove to make sure it's set in that notch that's in the shaft. Okay. There we go. The outer assembly, or the inner, whatever they call it, it's in now. It's all retained. So now what I need to do is take, if I can get it off the paper towel, it's all greasy. Come on. I'm going to take this part, which is these two pieces, put it in here, and get the larger retaining ring to lock into the lip here. So I'll set that in here, give a little bit of a push so I can start the retaining, work this thing around. There we go. And then I'll take the outer portion of this, which what I do is I put it on lock, make sure the arrow is pointed at lock, and then make sure that these are aligned with these outer holes here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and line these slots up with those two handles there. There you go. Start by locking one of these in. All right. And the situation is in this kingpin, this preload nut right here gets loose and worn in. It's mostly worn in, which causes loose. So you back off this, push this down by torquing it down to a certain foot-pounds, which from what I found on Fusion's page is 17 foot-pounds is the golden number for that. And they put on the little chat groups a certain process, which is undo it and then torque your thing and then snug it down and then wiggle your wheels. And bro, what I know is I got frickin' hydro steer, even with the suspend in the air, rotating this knuckle left and right is not on my hot to-do list. So what I'm going to do is just follow the steps, and it's going to be light years better than what it was. My driver's side, I probably got like a half a rotation. And I'm just clearing this out because I'm going to remove the Zerk so I can get in here with the actual socket better. Let's remove the Zerk fitting. And I'm using a 1 1/8. Probably could take a 28 mil, I just don't have one. There we go. Bob's your uncle. And then go ahead and careful not to get dirt into that Zerk fitting hole, but clean around this. Okay. Now we take this, supposedly set to 17 foot-pounds. See how much rotation we get. 90, 180, 270. Ooh, not quite 360. Another 45. So you do that. Get your wondrous blue Loctite. And then after you've gone ahead and tightened that down, you got your blue Loctite here. I'm going to put that on the threads of the jam nut area. But you can tell now there's no play if I wiggle. I'm wiggling out on the end of the hub, and there's zero play on that anymore. So tightening down that adjuster is important to watch. Is this going to be basically like losing your ball joint and having that go bad? Give you a little bit of death wobble, some flighty steering. So this would be an area of maintenance that I would say I was unaware of. Is this right here. When you buy these axles, there's not a whole lot of instruction at all. I'll be frank, there's no instruction at all on how to maintain or what to do. One of the parts that is a little off-putting to me, I'll discuss in a thing as I do a review, is just going to be the lack of ability to know what parts and replacements and all that stuff is. Okay, so we'll check this again. Okay, cool story. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take my little pick and scratch a little line to what 90 is on here, so I could tell if the inner load bearing gets rotated or not when I torque this down. And from what I read, check on your own, is that's 95 foot-pound setting. Okay, torque to 95. Doesn't look like it rotated at all. Wipe the excess blue Loctite out of here. Super snug. Let's get our Zerk fitting back in. And there we go. Well, time to close this up. So, ran into some unique things after putting it together. I think I did such an amazing job. Yeah, okay. So I ended up taking off the cover and the portions of the Yukon Hardcore hub out, which would be, there's that first initial ring that takes out the retainer that this spins on, then the gear set that's right out front here, and then the spring back there. So I put way too much grease on them, and so the two gear sets stick together, and then also too much grease because there's splines on the inside of this piece as well as splines on the outside of the gear set. And so the ability for it to slide back and forth was getting hampered because of the thickness of the red and tacky grease that I used on it. And so once I cleaned it up, basically left what was on there from just wiping it off, which will be plenty. Re-put this on, and then realized after looking at some stuff, because this was hard as a rock to turn, like hammer, no go, like not turning. This lid was too tight. These are like 22 inch-pounds. So I just did it by hand tightening. So tightening it with this and getting it firm instead of going like this and cranking down on it. And so now they spin free and lock back and forth. And how I tested it on this one is lock both sides, and then when you're spinning this side, the other side will spin in the opposite direction because there's no pressure on the wheels to make them spin the same way. And then when I unlocked it, this side I would spin by hand, and then the other side wouldn't spin. So I tested on both sides, which means they're locking and unlocking perfectly. Much more happy with that. Don't over grease the outside stuff. Like realistically, the spring needs no grease. If you want to just put a tab of barely any like grease on the spacer, the little tiny round that goes in here, and then barely any on those gear sets where the teeth go together at all. Barely. But on the forks that come out here on the opposite side of these that rotate, on the outside of those, on the back side of this cap, and then I did pop this back in, so this outside turn pops away from this other part, so this is a two-piece, and I put some grease on the O-ring on that one, so that way this rotates with a little bit of grease, which obviously adds a little bit of waterproofing because grease doesn't let the water through, although the water will wash it away. So, super stoked on this, happy about it. Now I'm done with this. Now it's to get back to some of the other issues that I have with it, but everything that I broke, fixed.